Thanks very much, Henry. So I have to say I'm personally thrilled to be on this panel. So I'm going to start with a confession. And that is that in my head, I always see myself as a 17-year-old. So I actually think I'm the youngest person in the room right now. So I feel very at home on this panel. So first of all, let me thank World Vision Canada, the Refugee Education Council, and the 100 Million Campaign for organizing this event. And Minister, it's a pleasure to see you here with us. And I'd also like to start with apologies and greetings from Canada's Minister of International Development. He would have loved to have been here. I know that he loves to interact on such panels, but unfortunately, due to house duty, he could not leave Canada. And because there's no interpretation, I'm going to stick to one of Canada's official languages during my introductory comments. So whether we're talking about conflict-based displacement in Syria, Bangladesh, Kenya, or elsewhere, as you all know better than me, young people have been on the front lines of efforts to protect the right to education everywhere, including during emergencies and protracted crises. And yet in many instances, young people are left out of the design and development of emergency responses and decisions that affect their lives. We know that when everyone is included, everyone does better. Nevertheless, the perspectives of youth are often not included, so we need to listen to and learn from them. Through its Together for Learning campaign, Canada is trying to do better on this front and encouraging partners and leaders at all levels to do the same. We launched this campaign 2 years ago to promote quality education for displaced children and youth with the key objective of amplifying and integrating youth ideas into our policies and programs. Last March, Canada hosted a Together for Learning Summit, which yielded concrete recommendations outlined in a youth manifesto. The youth involved in this summit identified 5 key areas requiring action. And they were inclusion, mental and psychosocial support, digital learning, gender equality, and accountability. And this manifesto's calls to action have helped to guide our subsequent work. So we've heard regularly from the members of the Refugee Education Council, some of whom are joining us here today, who generously offer their insights, analysis, recommendations based on their lived experiences. They're an important source of advice, guiding our global education work on issues that affect displaced children and youth. We also need to listen to and partner with local organizations, as well as with NGOs, universities and colleges, GPE, and ECW. And we heard again and again yesterday the global estimates of 222 million school-aged children in crisis situation needing access to education, and we all know that that number is rising. And we also know that only 68% of refugee children have access to primary education and a mere 37% to secondary education. For these children and their families and communities, education, of course, represents a critical lifeline to their futures. So the time to listen and to act is now. We need to listen to the voices of those most affected by crises, as they need to be involved in the design of the solutions. So I'm going to stop speaking now so that I can listen to you. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Norton, for your wonderful introduction. It is always encouraging, especially as a young person, when decision makers who have a seat at the decision-making table support the inclusion and integration of young people alongside you. So on behalf of the youth constituency, we really appreciate your presence here today and your remarks in support of young people. So this event is exciting, of course, not just because we have Ambassador Norton and some other wonderful panelists, but because this event, of the many side events that you have already attended and will attend today, is entirely created and led by young people, which is an incredible rarity in the humanitarian sector. So we are incredibly grateful to have the support of the 100 Million campaign, of World Vision Canada, and of the Refugee Education Council. This could not have happened without them, and these young people would not be here without their support. So I am really incredibly excited to introduce you to some fantastic panelists today. So to my right, we have Tracy Uzogwe, a teacher and youth advocate from Delta State, Nigeria, who serves as a coordinator at Nigeria Youth SDGs Network. Next to Tracy, we have Seme Lawate, a South Sudanese refugee from Bidi Bidi Camp in Uganda, who is a project officer for logistics at ICANN South Sudan. Next to Seme, we have Susan Hopgood, the president of Education International. And on the far end, we also have Yves Umuhoza, a Burundian refugee and a member of the Refugee Education Council. And as we've already met, Ambassador Norton, the Canadian ambassador to the United Nations. What is incredibly exciting, especially, is that Tracy and Seme here are members of the Education Cannot Wait youth constituency. As some of you may know, the Education Cannot Wait youth constituency is the first and only democratically youth organized constituency in the humanitarian sector, and the only youth constituency to democratically influence high-level humanitarian programs and policy. So they are here not just as ambassadors and representatives of their own communities, but they're also here as representatives of the constituency at ECW, which is groundbreaking. So we are really excited to have such a wonderful panel and to be able to show the perspectives of young people, teachers, and decision makers alongside each other. So my first question is going to be for Tracy, because despite the fact that young people are still often viewed solely as beneficiaries, they are already and have been transforming education systems in their own communities alongside teachers, humanitarians, and government leaders for some time. So my question for you, Tracy, is how are youth transforming education in emergencies at the local levels? What are some of the opportunities to scale up youth inclusion at this level? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Henry, and thank you everyone for being here. So I'll start by saying that I think personally that the strength of young people are not just in the words of their mouth, it's most especially in the actions that they take. And like you said, young people are transforming the responses to education in emergency. And I'm very particular about the word transformation because they do this from the level of advocacy to execution of projects, and most of which are self-funded at the local level. And I'll give you an example. In 2022, Nigeria was hit with the largest flood the country has ever had. And Nigerian's Youth SDG Network was able to train over 200 young people who are teachers to teach children who were displaced during this flood. And all of this was self-funded. And amongst all other things that young people are doing, they're also providing community advocacy, going to the houses of parents to talk to them, to allow their children come to school, especially in situations of people who are marginalized, like the disabled children, those who are girls, and also those who are from low-income families. And so these transformations do not just end in the classroom. Young people go as far as trying to bring in skills development, social entrepreneurial skills, trainings, climate action or climate change education to the children. And all of these you do not find in the normal school curriculum. And so this is why I said young people are transforming these responses at the local level. And because of all of these that have been happening, I think that there is really need to scale up the inclusion of young people at the local level. And I'm going to give 2 recommendations to this. The first one is that there should be increased funding to for the young people's initiative that they already started and already working on. This will help them to increase their capacity and increase their impact, and also help with sustainability. Because, for example, the work that we did in 2022 in Nigeria could not be sustained because there was no funding. And then the next thing I recommend is that when there are responses from the global level to the local level, usually when crisis or emergency hits, the first responders to this crisis are the people in the community, the parents, the teachers. These are people who are there at the local level experiencing these things. And so when these responses are being made from the global level, they should be included because they have some level of expertise and knowledge at that level because they're experiencing these things firsthand. And I'm emphasizing on this because most of these first responders are young people. And if their voice are not included in the interventions that are made from the global level, I feel most times those interventions are not as effective as they should be. And so when they're included, their knowledge and expertise are included in making decisions for these interventions for emergencies, then the process will be effective, and not just effective, it will also bring dignity to the people who are going through this crisis. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy, for that. I just want to pick up on one point because we may have some extra time here. You mentioned that humanitarian organizations should give more funding to youth-led organizations and young people in their own communities. Unfortunately, oftentimes there is a belief that some youth organizations may be working against, that they are not necessarily trustworthy, that they can't handle the organization necessary to receive funding like that. What would you say to that belief?
I would say that belief is unfounded, and it's two ways. I would advise young people, when you at the local level or at any level, when you start up, should identify, for example, like the ECW constituency, which is a body that has structure and can be trusted. And so when you do that and we come out as single organizations related to this other constituency, then there will be some sort of reliability. And then at the global level, I think generally when people come out to do things, for crisis, they're doing it because they care about people. They're not just there, they don't have the money to do it. It's because they generally care about people. And so I would just say trust is what we need for the young people.
Thank you, Tracy. My next question is going to be for Seme, which relates to the national level. Seme, how would you say that youth are transforming education in emergencies at the national level? And what are some barriers to including them as solution makers here?
Okay. Thank you for the question, Henry. Hello, everyone. I'd like to start by introducing myself and sharing some of my personal experiences. My name is Samuel Watekons. I am 22 years and a refugee from South Sudan. I fled my hometown here in 2016 due to conflict and arrived in a Bidibidi settlement in Uganda, where I live now. Bidibidi is the second largest refugee camp in the world and home to over 240,000 refugees. In 2022, over 30% were under the age of 17 and 84% were women and children. So when I arrived as an Akamban miner, I got involved with the ICANN South Sudan, a refugee-led organization in the camp, based in the settlement and funded in 2017. ICANN South Sudan, where I work currently now, is also active in South Sudan. It serves both in Uganda and South Sudan, and is devoted to protecting the well-being and rights of all IDPs and refugees, returnees, with a focus on women and children. ICANN South Sudan is pioneering youth-led solution to defending education in emergencies at the local, national, and global level setting. Locally, down at the refugee setting, locally we created child-friendly social centers, learning spaces for children, run girl empowerment clubs, and lead projects. Those kind of projects that we lead as disability is not a burden, because we know people ignore disabled children to access education. So I can took that space to write a project and implement it down there to see that disabled children are given access to education. The main purpose of managing that project is to enroll these children and make sure that they access education. Nationally, we are on the forefront of awareness campaign against harmful practices such as child marriage, because you see that child marriage down the route is more rampant, and young children, young youth are getting married in an age that is not appropriate. Child labor is one of the things that also we are campaigning, we are giving awareness for. We are also involved in national peace education using drama to spread the message of coexistences. So we see that the only way to spread that kind of message is through the drama. We engage drama clubs to speak up those messages to the community, that the community will listen. We also strongly demand, our demand down there, we strongly demand for school meals. That's one thing that we demand so much at the national level. School meals is a must for every child who is going to school. We know that school meals is the only source that can make the child survive at school. Because whenever this child comes home and look and come home trying to figure out how he can get food, it doesn't give that child a space to really learn. So we look at it like as if you can give the children the access to school meals, it can encourage them to go to school every time. So also in a global level, we are an active member at the ECD, at the ECW and youth student-led constituency, and advocate for stronger engagement of young people, especially those of us with lived experiences at all stages of decision making. So we as ICANN, we are part of ECW, and we strongly advocate that we see young people are given the opportunity, young people are given the opportunity at the decision making level to see that their voices are heard. And we are not alone. Basically, in running this process, we are not alone. There are young people outside their different countries who are also so much implementing the same project that we normally do as ICANN South Sudan. But the works that we normally do down there is rarely recognized, is rarely seen by people, is rarely recognized by everyone. In the national planning level, we are seen as beneficiaries. We are not seen as people who could really be there to implement projects, but we are seen as people who can benefit out of projects, not partners, basically. We are not given that platform to be partners who could implement activities down there. Our work is celebrated by decision makers. Yeah, decision makers can celebrate what we do. After seeing that we have already implemented something and it is really important in the community, they celebrate afterwards, but our ideas, the ideas that we bring on board are not really funded at the grassroots level. At the starting point, you see that the ideas young youth brings up on board, they are not funded. So people begin to celebrate their ideas, people begin to celebrate what they do at the stage that is already implemented. So we also experience discrimination against young people, and specifically against girls' education. That impact our ability to create change. So we know down in our communities, girl child education is ignored. Girl child education is not given a priority, that it can actually be seen that girls are encouraged to go to school. And also vocational and tertiary education for refugees is also severely underfunded. So back down the refugee setting, you find we only had one vocational center at the refugee setting where I came from, but that vocational center is already down. So you see that vocational centers are off and they are not really funded. For example, the vocational, like what I said, at the refugee setting, we only have one and it's not really funded. And the university scholarships are not really been given a room to the young people to access at the refugee setting. So young people could have the passion to go to school, but you see these people, once they reach at least to the age of, to the level of secondary school, they want to enter university, they find it so difficult for them to access university because they don't have any chance as a support that even give given to them. So you look at that as one of the challenge. In my final speech, I want to say it is all our responsibility as international community. It's our responsibility to fill these gaps in including young people in education emergencies, especially young refugees and IDPs. Once we fail to do reinforces the exclusion we have already faced, and means our solutions are lost. So the innovative ideas that we bring, we see that they've lost, and recognize our voices. We want that the international community to recognize the voice of the young people, work with us. We need to see that the international community, local leaders, leaders have to stand up and work with us, the young people. They should also fund the project that we bring on board. At least this project that the young people, the ideas that they have should at least be given an opportunity to be funded and included at all levels in all the countries. So thank you. This is my speech. Thank you.
Thank you, Seme, for sharing your story. I myself have already heard it, but it is still inspiring to hear every time. Another question that I might have for you is, simply because your presence here at this table in Geneva is so miraculous and unlikely, and even your presence at the national level, in which you're able to be a leader in your own community and a representative of your country, what is something that may have helped you along your journey a bit quicker to getting here? It could be a policy, it could be funding. What is something that if you had, it would have gotten you here much faster to this table?
Okay. The thing that I see as the only thing that can make me faster to this table, it is only once I'm given a platform to speak up. So when young people are given a platform to say their voices and they are heard, it gives us the morale, it gives us the opportunity to be sitting together. We see ourselves in a same level with the leaders that leads us, because we have a chance to speak up. We have a chance to voice out what we think could be for the youths down there. Thank you.
Thank you. So my next question is for Ms. Hopgood. What is the role of teachers in supporting young people to transform education at the national level? What are the gaps, and how, more importantly, can young people and teachers work together?
Well, thanks very much, Henry, for that question, and certainly thanks very much for giving me an opportunity to be part of this discussion. It's so wonderful to be part of a youth-led event. And as both Tracy and Seme have said, very, very clearly, I think, very clearly, your voices are the ones that matter, and they must be heard loud and clear. As teachers, we know, perhaps I should just say before I start, Education International is the voice of the teaching profession globally. We represent over 32 million teachers and education support personnel in more than 170 countries right across the globe. And as teachers, we know that quality education requires transformative pedagogies. And this means that teachers are not just transmitters of education and transmitters of information. Instead, we must ensure classes are inclusive of and relevant for all the students we teach in all their diversity. So we use, as best we can, student-centred, gender-responsive and liberating pedagogies, and we empower our students to speak up and have their say about their own education through democratic school councils and student unions. Teachers and students are partners in the educational process. That's a very important, a very important matter. The teacher-student relationship is a special one. Unfortunately, many private companies continue to push new technology, new education technologies as teacher replacements with the promise of bringing quality education to refugees and displaced youth at low cost. But I think for all of us, as we've been through the pandemic, and we know the impact of students not being able to go into a school setting and being away from the teachers, we all know that that cannot possibly be the answer, because these so-called innovative solutions fail to recognise the value of the student-teacher relationship, which is even more crucial in crisis contexts. And they fail to recognise that teachers do not only provide students with knowledge, skills and competencies, they play the role of counsellors, carers, defenders of student safety, and teachers are every student's greatest champion. We heard from Stella in the plenary yesterday, and she made this point very clearly, I think, to everyone in the room. The teachers are doing everything they can to support students in emergency contexts. However, they often do this in extremely challenging circumstances. And Stella told us about her school, her refugee settlement in Uganda, where she's teaching more than 200 students in one class. We know that teachers leave the profession because the pay is barely enough to cover their accommodation costs, let alone living costs for themselves and their family. And we know that education unions across multiple parts of the world are reporting, they report to us that teachers working in crisis contexts are sometimes not paid for months. They're paid sporadically or have difficulty accessing their salaries. And some teachers are afraid to go to work because of their safety at work is at risk. So if we do not give teachers the enabling conditions they need to support young people in emergencies, then we're denying their students the right to quality education. Because clearly, without a teacher, a student cannot have a quality education. And without those enabling conditions, a teacher is not able to do their work to ensure a quality education for each and every one of the students that they teach. One of the things that we believe is that we need a funding mechanism to support teachers in emergencies, because the students' right to education, because like the students' right to education, teachers' rights are not negotiable, and they continue to persist even in emergencies. Further, and very importantly, we need both teacher and student involvement in the design, implementation and assessment of education responses in crises. I think both Tracy and Sime have talked about this very eloquently. If we want to ensure quality education in emergencies, the only way we do so is to consult, listen to, and partner with those who are in the classroom, doing education every day. Teachers and students must work together and must listen to each other. Successful, sustainable solutions can never be found unless they are forged in collaboration with the people directly concerned. Their involvement helps build ownership and commitment to agreed strategies, but also ensures that the strategies make sense in a given context and are responsive to student and teacher priorities. Where possible, we must engage with student representatives, not just individual voices, because when we amplify the voices of representatives, we're not just amplifying the voice of one person, but their entire constituency. And where students are organised, they build power to make the changes they want to see to their education systems. Education International has been pleased to work in close collaboration with the Global Student Forum, the Federation of Student Unions from across the world, as an example of this. Teachers are committed to continue to work together with students at the global level, but also at the national level and the local level and the local levels, because together we are a powerful force. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hopgood. Thank you very much for your emphasis on the partnership between young people and teachers. This panel is meant to serve as a model for that exact sentiment. So we very much appreciate your echoing of it. Some of you may have noticed that we have another guest here today, which is Ms. Laura Frigenti, the CEO of GPE, the Global Partnership for Education. I'm very happy to welcome her here today, and we will be hearing from her quite shortly. So I'm very happy that she's here today. So my next question is going to be transitioning finally to the global level, and it's going to be for you, Eves. If you could talk a little bit about the role that young people are playing at the global level and what can be done to ensure that they are included in a more significant capacity.
Thank you so much, Henry. Well, that's a big question because local is global. Well, we have heard from our previous speakers, from Tracy and Seme, the different initiatives that young people are doing within their communities. And at a bigger picture, we can envision it as a global impact. I would like to give an example. I'm a member of the Refugee Education Council, which is a council comprised of 15 members from all around the world who have a lived experience as refugees and displaced person. And every month we get to meet twice, and we get to come together with our local experiences, expertise, wants and needs in order to bring about global solutions. And last year, as a council, we came up with a youth manifesto comprised of 5 thematic areas, which we found to be essential in addressing refugee education. And we see the government of Canada came up with an outcome document, which was supported by other organizations. And also, we see other education ministers from other nationals as well using the same youth manifesto in order to devise solutions in education emergencies in their own context. In a nutshell, I would say that it is not only youth innovation that is transforming education in emergencies, but it is our ideas, our determinations, it is our actions. It is us at all levels. 3 key practices of including youth at global level, I would like to, are the following. Firstly, there is need to scale up existing refugee youth-led initiatives. Throughout the conference, we have identified the impact that youth are making within their various communities. And so essentially they are leading solutions that work. And if they could have an opportunity to scale their work to a global level, I think that will meet a solution at a global level, at a bigger picture. Secondly, there is need for capacity strengthening to youth in order to maximize their potential, to maximize their impact, as well as for them to become more effective in their work. Thirdly, there is need for more provision of more paid work, intentional and meaningful opportunities for youth, particularly the refugee and displaced communities, in order to enable them to earn a living and at the same time making an impact in the organizations in which they serve. The only way that we are going to address the widening learning gap in education emergencies, it is by including solutions that are informed by lived experiences. We need to stop viewing youth from the lenses of needing solutions to seeing them as solution makers, thereby providing them with spaces to enable them to become solution makers. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Yves, for your remarks, and your specificity on the key practices of including young people is that much more important, because so often it is said that young people should be included, but how exactly that can happen and how exactly they can be empowered to happen is a conversation that's just as important. So thank you for that. I will pose the same question to Ambassador Norton. Uh, at the global level, how can young people be included?
Thanks very much for the question. And to be true to our approach, it's a question I would probably put back to the panel if we're here to listen to their perspectives. But I think we have got a few ways that Canada has worked to engage youth in our programming, including for education in emergencies, as well as I would say across the board, but in this case, it has resulted in better programming, better policies, and development results coming from an organization that is also part of our ministry is also our aid agency is integrated, and so we do talk about development results, which are key. So first, engaging youth at all stages of the policy and programming cycle, from consultation to design to implementation and evaluation, and also making sure that they have a seat at the table in key discussions, such as the one that we're having here today. Secondly, of course, minimizing potential hurdles for youth taking on leadership roles, and this includes ensuring that youth have safe, supportive, and inclusive spaces to engage and operate. Third, actually listening to their contributions and acting on their recommendations. So examples include, of course, a shift to focus to increase access to and use of technology and digital learning, as well as an increased focus on psychosocial support, including teacher training. And we heard this from some of the panelists already. And finally, I would say and stress this point, it's about being accountable to youth, including by providing feedback and follow-up regarding the recommendations. And I would say that for those of you who've worked on gender equality over the years or during your careers, some of these best practices might resonate and sound very familiar, while others are somewhat new, and that's because the perspective is coming from a different place. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Norton, for your important perspective. Thus far, we've spoken about the inclusion of young people, specifically affected young people, about the inclusion of teachers, and about the importance of collaboration among those different groups. We are incredibly excited to have Laura Fragenti here from GPE, because GPE, through its multi-stakeholder approach and constituent governments format, brings together all of the key elements that we've discussed so far through the transformation of education. So my next question is for you, and it is, how exactly can organizations like GPE connect the local to the global, as our panelists have discussed, and empower youth and teachers to continually work together to shape policy?
Thank you so much, Harry. Thank you for inviting me. And I was so happy that we could make it happen and I could be here, because actually I am old enough to appreciate how important this topic that we're discussing today is. When I was growing up, a few decades ago, but not many decades ago, it would have not even crossed my mind the thought that I could have the ability to influence the curricula, the kind of things that I was being taught in school, the form that was offered to me in terms of my education. Education was something that was prepared by others, that I had to go through, possibly as well as possible. And then after that, it was a given that it would have prepared me for life. And that equation didn't really work, in a sense that that education that was designed by, people that were various generations older than me didn't necessarily prepare me for the life of tomorrow. And I think that if we all start from the assumption that one of the important roles of education is to prepare the citizens of the future, it's really important that the citizens of the future have a voice and have a say on what they want to be and what they want the education process to offer them. And so this is one of the things that to me is one of the most important feature of the work that GPE does in country, which is really to, through the partnership model that Harry was making reference to, is to make sure that there is a platform for youth leaders to actually have a dialogue with policymakers and express what they think is important to see. They have been championing important battles of reforming curricula, of making them more inclusive, of eliminating stereotypes the way that they have seen perpetrated in societies, etc., etc. All this, of course, GPE has only provided a little bit of, how can I say, financial capital to make sure that they could get themselves organized and have this opportunity of debating with the leaders in their own country, and then bring together experiences that they have learned from other youth leaders in other countries, and see how relevant or how can they be addressed and changed and modified for the context in which they were working. So I think that this to me is really an important feature, and I like to believe that it's going to have a dramatically positive impact on how relevant the kind of things that you learn in school are going to be, to make sure that children do not just learn things that are strong on the academical front, but that actually help them shape the society in a way that will create a better world, in the future.
Thank you. Thank you for your remarks. As much as I'd love to ask a follow-up question, we only have so much time today. So I'm going to take us to audience questions. Let's try one or two, and we'll see where we are on time after that. So if anybody has a question for the panelists or an individual panelist. Yes.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for your interventions this morning. It's an invigorating first session of the day. I'm Matt Michaels. I'm with the Interagency Network for Education and Emergencies. Semi mentioned peace education through drama and Bidi. Are there other actions of the youth of participating not just in emergency response, but in peace building, in peace education that you can highlight for us? Excuse me. And what impact are you seeing with these programs, and how can the global community better support those interventions? Thank you. Or whoever.
Okay, I think it's good for you to pass a very repeated question for me to hear it very well from the other side. If you can.
Can you give us other examples of peace education interventions that have worked, and what has helped them work? What's been the impact, and how can we better support them?
Okay. The peace examples I can give specifically down there at refugee setting, where there are clubs that actually been formed at the community level. They take a role to see that they teach the community to coexist in peace. Like, because there at the refugee setting, we have the refugees themselves who flee from the country that is affected by war and come and settle with the host communities who have been living in that country for before they came in. So you find there are conflicts that will arise in between these people, like specifically issues to do with firewood, water, and these are the challenges that you find most of the times refugees doesn't have at their side. So when they start accessing those things from the host community side, you find there are conflicts between them. So young people, young girls, they've been raped, people have been killed because the host community could not allow the refugees to access those things. So these groups that are formed, peace club groups are formed purposely to bring that coexistences between the refugee community and the host community. So they educate this refugee community and the host community on how they could coexist as people who can be living together. So looking down there, the challenges that makes these conflicts or maybe these groups to exist was because of this lack of water facilities, lack of firewood. And once the refugee sites begin to access those things from the host, it brings conflict. So those groups are formed, but they are not funded. They are not really given a lot of capacity building. So they just formally work on their own, the way they feel peace could be among themselves, they speak. But once they're given capacity building, I think it could work better to see that peace exists between these two communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Seme. We only have a minute left, so I'm going to close this out with some final remarks. One question that you may have now that we weren't able to get to, or even tomorrow, is how can I support not only these wonderful youth advocates and their partners, and so what I would say to that, not only in their own activism, but in the humanitarian sector and in the relationship between humanitarians and governments, is that, of course, after this, please approach all of these young people. Please get their contact information. Follow them on social media and engage in discussions with them consistently. That is amazing, and that is really important. But even more profoundly, the constituency that Seme and Tracy are a part of are calling on you all, on humanitarian organizations and networks, to include them, to include young people democratically in their organizational structures for the very first time, as ECW has done. So that tonight, when all of you and all of us get on the plane and go home tomorrow, the next time that we see each other is not going to be in another year when we're here in Geneva again. It's not going to be in a few months in September when you see Seme and Tracy and Yves at the General Assembly. It's going to be tomorrow on your governing boards, at your decision-making tables, full partners in the process. So support them, support their work, but more importantly, include them democratically, as ECW has already done. Thank you, everybody, for being here, and we will let you go to the plenary session. I'll leave the cards.